Hi folks, you're with Tacitus today, your pushback channel. Thank you for joining this audio live stream. In this essay, I'd like to talk about a chance meeting that I had. It's kind of turned into an interview with a radical activist lesbian lawyer from North America. As soon as we ended up sort of sitting in some seating and ended up sitting sort of almost next to each other, and someone commented on how nice the day was, and then sort of responded, and so we came sort of quite by accident really to be talking, but she looked, like if you went to Central Casting, said, send me a lesbian radical, they would send you her. So there wasn't much doubt. And just a couple of words were enough to figure, well, she's from the Northeast United States. So, looked very Jewish as well. So we've got a Jewish lesbian radical activist from the Northeast of the United States. And that could be worked out in sort of almost seconds. Someone else wouldn't have spotted that, but given sort of observations I've been making over the years, it came along pretty quick. So I started to just chat. Now, so I went along the lines of, are you a legal aid lawyer involved in social justice activism? And her head spun around and said, well, how did you know? I said, oh, just a guess. So it's pretty obvious the sort of occupations these people take. There's something about the look and the vibe they give off that suggests that not only their occupation and what they've been doing and have done, but their worldview and how they think the world should be reshaped so that, as they, in their perception at least, that social equity and restorative social justice is not only applied but runs rampant. So now she's got all the lesbians, got all the credentials. She's clerk to radical activists judges. Has been involved in every fucking angry lesbian society you can think of, and group and NGOs and so on. So. Now, I have to, it's important to point out that she was pleasant enough to me, as in, polite, but it was also very clear based on the body language, the way sort of she pulled back at a 15 to 20 degree angle from the vertical, pulled back to sort of regard me. So it was quite clear while she was polite and that there's no doubt of it, I was the enemy. Straight, white, male, Trump voted. I'm not American, so I couldn't vote for Trump, but far more in bed with the policies of the President Trump's administration I would be with the lesbian NGO activism or something. But she whilst at the same time talking to me because of the basic rules of civility required it, she nonetheless, I could see, perceived me as an enemy. And the body language sort of almost instantly kicked off with that. Now, I think I was, quadruply sort of dangerous because, well, a straight white male, but also, the confidence of someone who has accomplished things and who has a certain amount of intellect. These things, that was also considered to be if you're some sort of low-life feral from out in the sticks, you can be dismissed. But people like us can't be dismissed in that way, and which again sort of makes us doubly dangerous. But coming now to the issue of how she perceives justice. So this was the bit, and this is really the essence of the essay. I've always struggled to see, well, why would you want a court or a legal system where there are activist judges and activist prosecutors and activist this, and where evidence doesn't matter and ideology is all that matters, and where you can just make things up based on, why would you want something like that? Isn't equality before the law, the essence of law and the testing of evidence so that people can't bear false witness against you? Because ideological law allows all these activists to bear false witness against people without needing to have evidence tested. So it's well, we can't let Mr. Smith have access to his children because he might commit acts of violence. Well, what evidence do you have to? He might ideologically. So the radical lesbian psychologist can say that Mr. Smith might pose a danger to the children. Well, what danger? What are you talking about? It's an ideological determination. So ideological evidence can't be cross-examined. So it's the equivalent of bearing false witness, and they know that. But they say that's the price, very much worth paying. In fact, it should be paid in their view. So I'll come across that, because I've never understood that. Well, no, I have. I have understood why they're not interested in facts and evidence, because then that makes their case unwinnable. And they can invent an ideological fantasy world, and they can win on that basis. That they can do, but facts and evidence they can't. And so that's why facts and evidence get in the way. And facts and evidence are obstacles, huge obstacles to their recreating a world, or rebuilding the world, as they say, build back better, making a world where ideology reigns supreme, whereas facts, reality, and organic development and so on are dismissed. So I'll come more now to the sort of the meat of it, if you will. She believes that the Supreme Court in the United States was stacked by Trump. Trump's the evil Hitler and everything, and was stacked by Trump. So, all right, then, well, let's accept that. Let's say that was the case. Isn't putting Ketanji Brown Jackson into the court, isn't that stacking the court? No, it's not. Well, how can that be? If one putting the judge in is stacking the court, but the other doing it, how can that be? Surely it's the same. No. You must understand the world through the social lens of social power. That's all things are seen here. Now, Ketanji Brown Jackson is a woman and black, tick. So she is the protector of the oppressed classes. So it's therefore not stacking the court if you put her in there, because she's protecting the oppressed, or her role. It's all ideological, so try and follow this. But the constitutional judges that apply the law, the actual law, facts, evidence, reason, logic, these sorts of things, these are the tools through which and by which the oppressor class, oppress the oppressed. How the oppression continues. Only by taking away facts, evidence, reason, and logic can we redress this imbalance, and that the oppressed can be freed from the chains of their oppression. Now, you say it's very, very Marxist in a lot of ways, and it is, but she adamantly believes this. This is not something she's just sprouting off and, I heard it somewhere, or my college lecturer said that. It's not that. And this woman would be in her 50s, so she's probably still got another 10 years of work or whatever to ahead of her. But goodness knows what damage she'll cause in that time. But this is very much a belief she has. We cannot have a legal system with facts, evidence, reason, logic. We cannot have it. It will continue. The result will be that the oppressed will continue to be oppressed. Now, we went to sort of other things that, don't you realize what they used to do to gay lesbian people? 1,000 years ago, lesbians were taken out back and hanged or shot or killed or something. 1,000. Okay, all right. Well, I don't know about that. I'll need to do some research, because these people have a habit of, these sort of activists, the habit of, and slaves were killed by the hundreds of millions, the billions. There was no slaves left because they're all murdered. Well, how come there are black people in the US now? Don't ask difficult questions, you damn fascist. So that they have this habit of creating these fantasy sort of Armageddon scenarios and saying, look, we have to fix this problem. Whereas the problem never existed in the first place. They invented it. It's a fantasy. So she was claiming that 1,000 years ago they were killing lesbians and so on, or people that were believed to be lesbian. And so we had to fight for those rights. So the next tier of things, not only is there restorative justice, the next, which I hadn't quite picked up on earlier, but the next tier of fears that they have, again, invented and ideological, is that they've now got some rights, and they've now got advantages and benefits that they didn't previously have. This is, we're talking LGBTQ now, but it covers the broader brush of anyone who doesn't have maximum levels of social power, really, that is kind of incorporated in their overall narrative. And so she says, well, by people like President Trump coming along, or the constitutional judges on the Supreme Court of the United States, what that's going to do, that's going to create the environment where we'll just go back to the days of 1,000 years ago, where lesbians were taken out the back and shot, or hung or killed, or whatever they did back then, beheaded or something. So that was the fear that they have, that there's this omnipresent, Hitler, and remember, she's Jewish, so they've got this thing, another Hitler is only just around the corner, but they have this view that it's about to slip back into the days of barbarism from 1,000 years ago. Any minute now, any minute it's going to happen. And if we don't have people who are aggressively, proactively preventing that it will happen. And now that's an unrealistic, if not absurd, sort of view. So I switched around. I said, okay, well, the persecution of the Jews, which again always gets waved around, Hitler and Nazi. So the way they went after the Jews was to deny them their legal rights. They didn't have the same legal rights as the other citizens. That's how they went after them. They just denied their legal rights. They denied them due legal process. They placed a heavy burden of proof on the Jewish people, whereas a much lesser burden of proof on the Gentile. And that's how they got the prosecutions and taking their businesses and their money, those sorts of things. That's how the fines, and that's how they went about it. But if the Jews had always been kept having exactly the same rights as legal rights as anyone else, and that only tested facts and evidence could be used against them, then the persecution of Jews could not have happened. This is, I'm talking, Nazi Germany. The persecution of the Jews could not have happened because their legal rights would have been intact. And if you want to bring a case against them, you'd have to have, like any other case, you have the proper evidence. It had to be tested in court by an impartial judge, not an activist judge or a judge that was negative towards Jews, this sort of thing. So putting it, no. The hatred was there. It's the hatred, the ideological hatred we have. It's that we have to deal with, not the law. So she flipped the script essentially, saying, well, even if the law doesn't matter, it's really we're going after the hatred that people have in their hearts, or something like that. And it's that because people with higher levels of social power have more hatred than people with lower levels of social power. No, I dismissed that out of hand as being absolute nonsense. But this was the sort of thing that she maintained. And when I think about the other stuff I've read and heard, this is pretty close. This is about 100% representative of the views that I've seen out there. So again, just reiterating that law, facts, evidence, reason, and logic are the tools of the oppressor class to keep the oppressed oppressed, or even to increase the oppression on them. I mean, that's absurd on the face of it. But even if equality before the law is there, and the suspension of that equality results in the victimization of this or that group, that's not the issue. It's the hatred that drives it is the issue. And so we're allowed. So what do you do then? Because you can ideologically say that person has hatred in their heart. And it could be, for example, you say, well, Charlie Kirk, he doesn't agree with transgender, something or other. He has hatred in his heart. So once you go to that step, though, and not sure this lesbian actually grasped it, once you go to that step, you've gone outside the bounds of the law, the legal process. Because in the legal process, you can't drag someone into court because they may have hatred in their hearts. I mean, they're making a good go of it these days, but it's much harder to do. You have to have the activist judge, the activist prosecutor, NGOs funding the case. You've got to have a lot of doors lined up before you can do that. And they just can't do it. If somebody is particularly wealthy, for example, and they're going to put up a good legal fight, it's tough. It's tough to nail them. You can do it, but I mean, vast resources have to be expended. It's easy to pick off some little flunky, and somewhere out in the sticks. the Ozark Mountains that doesn't like men using women's bathrooms. They're easy to pick off. They can't fight back, but not against the resources of an activist state and cashed up NGOs. But other people, Charlie Kirk would have been a much bigger target to try and take on, and the fight would have been lengthy and expensive, and they don't want that. They want the easy targets, like any thugs, bullies. They want the easy target. So she's gone on to say, well, if the law doesn't suit us, then it doesn't matter. And this is also very much part of their thing. If facts and evidence fall into line with their ideology, they're happy to use them. But if facts, evidence, reason, logic do not fall in line with what they're attempting to do, then they're happy to discard it. But the point that was saying here, that people who have hate in their hearts no longer should have the protection of the law. And this is hate against LGBTQ or anyone with minimal social, black people or whatever. So the architecture of how it is now. She didn't say this, by the way, nor did she promote an assassination. But the architecture of once you declare ideologically someone has hate in their hearts, this is the equivalent of in the Spanish Inquisition to say, well, someone's in league with demonic forces. They're in league with the devil. They're meeting with the devil out the back and hatching nefarious plans. Therefore, they're not entitled to legal rights, nor should they be. We're allowed to kill them. They're in league with the devil, for fuck's sake. Now, this was, again, the path she was going down. These people have hate in their hearts. The law should no longer protect them. They're now, beyond evil. These are the oppressors and social power. And so this, in my opinion, this is her view was that once you're declared ideologically to be outside the protections of the law, then due legal process and this sort of thing. No. It's now okay to kill you. If not kill you, certainly maximum deperson. You have no banking, you have no job, you have no social media presence. You're nothing. You don't. You're an outcast, and or we kill you. So this is the idea. But all the time she's talking, she believes she is the moral superior. It's the others that are the bad guys, and so this idea of all court cases must be through the prism of ideologically determined social power in order to do restorative justice. So, but they reach back in time. Did you know the slaves that in the 1500s that happened to the slaves? Okay, well maybe it did. What's that got to do with today? I can randomly take atrocities from anywhere in the world. You know what the Mongols did? You know what the Mongols did to the Christians? Do you know what they did? You know what they did? Yeah. You could do that over anything. So the idea that such wild claims give them some sort of moral superiority, which allows, well, we're going to take away your rights today for what your ancestors may or may not have done 500 years ago. What? I mean, can you hear yourself? Do you know what you're saying? But this is it. Now, this person's been radicalized, according to her at least. She wouldn't call it radicalization. She would say, my eyes were opened or something. So she's been radicalized by the Jewish education system. Yeah, and another Hitler is everywhere. The architecture of social power and victimhood, then through law studies at college, and then clerking for radical activist judges, hanging around with, like there's a cohort of sort of Jewish, lesbian, political, legal activists, and they all hang around in a crowd, all sort of reinforcing each other's insane prejudices. But this is the belief. So this idea that people who are not part of their groupthink can get killed, assassinated, depersoned, whatever. This is deeply baked into the architecture of their worldview. They see nothing wrong with it. They're the ones who are doing the right thing. It's the other ones who are bad. So they can stack the Supreme Court of the United States, and that's good because they're protecting the oppressed. But when judges are appointed that rely on facts and evidence, then they are the oppressors of the oppressed. Therefore, it's stacking if you do that, but it's not stacking if you do it on the, and same activist judges being appointed. No, but they're there to protect the oppressed. What about bringing sort of flimsy cases against people that you don't like? Well, that's okay, because even if they didn't commit the crime themselves, they're ideologically guilty of having hate in their heart, and so on and so forth. This insanity is everywhere across the Western world legal system, NGOs, education system, and so on. And we have to do a lot of work into rooting it out. You've been a Tacitus today in your Pushback channel, and thank you for listening.